Have you ever wondered why some women seem completely unfazed by rejection, while others crumble under the weight of it? Why some walk away from love with grace, while others cling to something that's clearly not right for them? The difference isn't luck, it's value. High-value women handle love and rejection in a way that sets them apart. And it's not because they're heartless or immune to emotion. It's because they've mastered something deeper. They don't tie their worth to one person's opinion. They don't chase closure, they create it. They love fully but never lose themselves. They recognize effort, not excuses. And most importantly, they don't get swept up by attraction alone. They look for alignment. That rare, powerful connection where values, goals, and intentions match. They understand that rejection isn't a failure, it's a filter. Every no simply clears the path for the right yes. They don't let chemistry cloud their judgment. Instead, they choose peace over potential, clarity over confusion, and truth over fantasy. So if you've ever felt lost after love or broken by rejection, this message is for you. Because once you start thinking like a high-value woman, everything changes. And love starts working for you, not against you. You know what's funny about love? We grow up thinking that if someone doesn't love us back, it means we weren't good enough. That we didn't say the right thing, didn't wear the right clothes, didn't show enough of who we are, or worse, showed too much. But let me tell you something that high-value women understand deeply. Someone else's inability to love you the way you deserve says nothing about your worth. It only reveals their level of readiness, alignment, or capacity. And when they say no, or when they pull away, is not the end of your story. It's just the wrong character exiting the scene. Rejection stings. I get it. It's supposed to. You're human. You opened up. You cared. You maybe even dreamed a little about the future. And then, just like that, the response you hope for doesn't come. Or worse, you're met with silence. But here's the secret. A high-value woman feels that pain, and then she steps back and says, wait, is this really about me not being enough? Or is it about them not being ready, not seeing clearly, or not being capable of showing up in the way I need? She doesn't spiral into self-doubt or chase validation. She doesn't look for ways to make herself smaller just to fit into someone else's limited view. Doesn't think, if I had done this one thing differently, maybe you would have stayed. No? She understands that rejection isn't always personal, even when it feels deeply personal. It's often circumstantial. It's often about timing. And sometimes it's just incompatibility, wearing a mask of attraction. What makes her high value isn't that she never feels hurt or disappointed. It's that she doesn't let the rejection define the narrative she tells herself after. She doesn't create a story about being unlovable or unworthy. She doesn't catastrophize and turn one person's no into the world's never. She knows who she is. She knows what she brings to the table. And if someone doesn't see it, she doesn't try to rearrange the whole table to prove herself. She just invites better company next time. You see, we live in a world that teaches us to overvalue external approval. It tells us to chase the one who pulls away, to prove ourselves, to win them back. But high-value women don't do that. They don't perform for love. They don't audition for someone who's already turned their back. They don't hold on to crumbs hoping for a meal. They recognize when someone is emotionally unavailable or simply not choosing them. And instead of trying harder, they walk, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. Because she knows something that most people forget. When you tie your value to how someone feels about you, you give away your power. You let someone else become the mirror you reflect yourself in. And when that mirror cracks or turns away, suddenly your sense of self goes with it. But the truth is, real confidence, real self-worth isn't proven when someone chooses you. It's proven in how you respond when they don't. She chooses herself every single time. She remembers that the right connection won't require her to doubt herself. It won't feel like a constant test. It won't be built on hot and cold behavior, vague promises, or a version of love that's always just out of reach. And so if someone pulls away or doesn't choose her fully, she lets them go. Not because she didn't care, but because she cares about herself too much to stay where she's only half loved. And here's the thing. When you treat rejection as proof that you weren't enough, you stop showing up fully in your next relationship. You start guarding your heart. You hold back. You become a watered-down version of yourself that when you see rejection for what it really is, a form of redirection, you allow it to strengthen you, not shrink you. You use it as a filter, not a sentence. And suddenly, every no becomes one step closer to a better yes. That's what high value looks like. Not arrogance, not indifference, but deep, unwavering self-respect. So if you've been rejected, or if you're holding on to the echo of someone who couldn't love you the way you deserved, I want you to remember this. Their inability to love you is not evidence of your inadequacy. It's evidence of their limitation. And just because they couldn't love you doesn't mean someone else won't. In fact, someone will fully, clearly, and without hesitation. But only if you stop waiting to be chosen by the wrong person and start living like you're already enough, because you are, always have been, always will be. And anyone who doesn't see it is just not your person. You see, one of the biggest misconceptions people have about being a high-value woman is that it means being cold, detached, or playing hard to get. But that's not strength, that's fear, wearing a mask. High value doesn't mean emotionally unavailable, it means emotionally intelligent. A high-value woman loves with an open heart, but not a blind one. She's not afraid of being vulnerable. She doesn't see love as weakness. In fact, she knows that loving someone, really loving them, being present, giving, emotionally available, requires far more strength than withholding affection ever will. But here's where the distinction lies. She doesn't confuse vulnerability with self-abandonment. She's not the woman who ignores red flags just because she's emotionally invested. She doesn't twist herself to fit into someone else's mold. She doesn't chase someone's potential while ignoring the reality of how she's being treated today. That's the key difference. A high-value woman doesn't lose herself in love. She brings herself fully into love. She's present, she gives her time, her energy, her attention, but never at the cost of her boundaries. She knows what her values are. She knows how she wants to be treated. And if someone violates that consistently, no matter how much she feels for them, she's willing to walk away. Because she knows this, loving someone doesn't always mean keeping them in your life. This is where emotional maturity comes in. See, it's easy to be cynical after heartbreak. It's easy to build walls, to say, I'll never open up again, or I'll never trust anyone like that again. But the high-value woman doesn't let past pain turn her into someone she's not. She learns from it, but she doesn't become bitter. She refines her standards, not her softness. And yes, sometimes that means loving someone deeply and still choosing to let them go because the love isn't being returned in a healthy, sustainable way. That's not weakness. That's incredible strength. Most people stay far too long in situations where they're hoping the other person will catch up to the love they're giving. But a high-value woman knows if you have to convince someone to love you, it's already not the love you want. When you operate from that place of internal security, something shifts. You stop chasing validation. You stop interpreting someone else's inability to meet you where you are as a reason to shrink yourself. You start seeing love not as a reward for being enough, but as a mutual exchange between two people showing up equal. And if someone can't meet you in that space, it's not a loss, it's clarity. Now, this doesn't mean she's rigid. She's not looking for perfection. She's not writing people off at the first minor misstep. But she pays attention. She listens to her intuition. She doesn't get swept up in the fantasy and ignore the reality. She knows that real love is about alignment, about consistency, about showing up even when it's not convenient. Because here's the truth. Love can feel amazing, but it should also feel safe. You shouldn't have to constantly guess where you stand. You shouldn't be in a cycle of being adored one week and ignored the next. That's emotional chaos, not connection. A high-value woman recognizes the difference. She wants love, but not just any love. She wants the right love. And she's willing to wait for it rather than settling for emotional crumbs just to feel seen. There's an elegance in the way she handles herself in love. She's not performing. She's not trying to prove her worth. She shows up as she is. She's fully herself, and she gives the other person the space to do the same. But if they can't, or if they show her that they're not ready for something real, she doesn't make excuses for them. She simply steps back with grace, with composure, and with peace. This is where her power lies. Not in closing off her heart, but in trusting it. Trusting that she can give love and protect herself. Trusting that rejection doesn't break her, it reveals something. Trusting that walking away from something misaligned makes space for something extraordinary. So if you've ever felt like being open, being loving, being real somehow makes you too much, I want to remind you, it doesn't. The right person won't be scared off by your depth. They'll be drawn in by it. But until that person arrives, you don't need to water yourself down. You just need to stay grounded in who you are. Because when you love with clarity, with standards, and with self-respect, you don't just attract love, you attract the kind of love that's actually worth keeping. You see, one of the biggest traps people fall into when they're emotionally invested is making excuses for someone else's behavior. And high-value women, they don't do that. They don't spend time decoding mixed signals or justifying someone's lack of effort. They don't get caught in this loop of maybe he's just busy or maybe he's afraid of getting hurt. No, they look at what's actually happening, not what they hope is happening. Because here's the truth. When someone truly values you, you don't need to convince them to act like it. You don't have to beg for their attention, remind them of your worth, or lower your standards just to keep them interested. A high-value woman understands that effort is not something that should be negotiated. It's the bare minimum. She pays attention to patterns, not potential. She doesn't fall in love with the idea of what someone could be. She focuses on who they are right now. We often hear things like, but he told me he really likes me, or he said he's just not ready. But then look at his actions. If his words say one thing and his behavior says another, she believes the behavior. If he says he's into you, but you're always the one reaching out, always the one initiating, always the one planning everything, that's not effort. That's imbalance. And a woman who knows her value doesn't dance in that imbalance. She doesn't stick around waiting for someone to figure it out while her emotional needs go unmet. She's not operating from a place of fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear that no one else will come along. That's what keeps so many people trapped in relationships where they're overextending and under-receiving. A high-value woman knows that being alone is not the worst thing. Settling is. She'd rather be on her own than with someone who makes her feel invisible. Her time is valuable, her energy is sacred, and she's not giving either away to someone who only shows up when it's convenient for them. And here's the thing, she doesn't get angry when someone doesn't choose her. She doesn't chase. She doesn't try to prove her worth to someone who can't see it. She lets them go. Because she knows that chasing validation from someone who's indifferent is emotional bankruptcy. She doesn't need to perform for love. She doesn't need to shrink herself or overcompensate. She just needs someone who meets her where she's at, not someone she has to drag there. Now, that doesn't mean she's cold or rigid. She's emotionally open, she's kind, she's nurturing, but she's also discerning. She sets the tone for how she wants to be treated, and if someone can't match that, she doesn't take it personally, she just walks away. Not because she doesn't care, but because she cares that much about her peace, her energy, and her emotional well-being. She doesn't hang on to the little breadcrumbs someone throws her and call it a feast. She doesn't romanticize the 5 minutes of attention she gets after being ignored for days. She doesn't call inconsistency mystery or emotional unavailability depth. She calls it what it is: unhealthy, unfulfilling, and not enough. And here's where it gets powerful, because the moment she starts living from this place of emotional honesty, she begins attracting people who actually show up. She creates a standard, and that standard becomes a filter. It weeds out the ones who aren't serious, who aren't consistent, who aren't capable. And yeah, maybe there are fewer people who make it through, but the ones who do, they're the ones who are truly aligned. They're the ones who want to give, not just take. The ones who are not intimidated by her standards, but inspired by them. A high-value woman doesn't need someone to complete her. She wants someone who complements her. She doesn't need constant reassurance because she has a strong internal compass. She trusts her gut, and when something feels off, she listens to that voice. She doesn't silence it for the sake of keeping someone around. There's power in being able to say, I like you, but I'm not going to keep investing in something that's not being reciprocated. It's not ego. That's self-respect. That's emotional maturity. That's someone who knows that love should feel like a mutual exchange, not a one-sided sacrifice. So no, she's not cold. She's just no longer available for relationships where she has to do all the emotional heavy lifting. She knows that real connection doesn't require chasing. It feels mutual. It feels intentional. It feels clear. You know, one of the most disempowering things we can do to ourselves after a breakup or after someone walks away is to sit around waiting for closure. We replay the last conversation. We analyze the text messages. We wonder if we should have said something different, done something more, been a little less, a little more. And then we think, if only I could just talk to them one more time. If I could just get that one explanation, they could just tell me why, then maybe I could move on. But here's the truth that high-value women know deep in their bones. Closure doesn't come from the person who hurt you. It comes from you. It's not something you ask for. It's something you create. When someone disappears, pulls away, or ends things abruptly, it's easy to believe we're owed an explanation, that somehow they should give us peace before they go. But the reality is, people don't always leave us cleanly. They ghost. They avoid hard conversations. They give us half-truths or vague reasons like, it's not you, it's me. Or, I'm just not ready for something serious. And even when they do give you a reason, it rarely satisfies you. Why? Because what we're really looking for in closure is emotional justice. We want them to admit they messed up. We want them to regret it. We want them to feel what we're feeling. But that's not closure. That's seeking validation, and that's giving your power away. A high-value woman doesn't chase that kind of closure. She doesn't spend weeks or months drafting texts she'll never send or rehearsing conversations that will never happen. She knows that waiting for someone else to make her feel okay again is a prison of her own making. Instead, she takes the pain and she uses it as information. She says, okay, he walked away. He didn't fight for me. He stopped calling. That tells me something. That's all I need to know. See, closure is really about acceptance, not approval, not explanation, acceptance. Accepting that the story ended before you wanted it to. Accepting that it didn't go the way you hoped. Accepting that someone didn't see your value, or maybe they did, but they still weren't willing to match your effort. That hurts, but it's also freeing Because now you're no longer stuck waiting for someone else to turn the page. You get to do it yourself. And you don't need to be cold or indifferent to do this. You can still have compassion. You can still feel the sadness. You can still grieve, but you grieve with dignity. You don't beg someone to come back just to soothe the ache. You don't convince someone to explain themselves just so you can feel a sense of finality. Because you are the final word. You decide that the chapter is over. Not because it didn't mean anything, but because dragging it out won't bring you peace. Sometimes people come back weeks or months later with their half-baked apologies or their "I've been thinking about you" messages. But here's the kicker. By the time they do, the high-value woman has already built her closure. She doesn't need their words anymore because she already created her own peace. And if she does talk to them again, it's from a place of strength, not longing. She's not hoping for a rekindling. She's already healed. Closure is also about choosing your narrative. You can decide the story is, he left because I wasn't good enough. Or it can be, he wasn't capable of showing up for me in the way I deserved. And thank God, I found that out now. One keeps you small, the other sets you free. And let's be honest, sometimes the hardest part isn't even the rejection. It's the silence, the unanswered questions, the way they just disappeared or moved on like it was nothing. But don't confuse silence with mystery. When someone walks away without clarity, that is clarity. Their lack of effort to give you closure is the closure. Their inability to be honest with you at the end says everything about their emotional capacity and nothing about your worth. A high-value woman doesn't just know how to walk away, she knows how to let go. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because she loves herself too much to stay emotionally entangled with someone who isn't choosing her. She doesn't wait for apologies. She doesn't wait for the perfect goodbye. She creates her own ending. She decides the lesson, writes the conclusion, and carries the wisdom into the next chapter of her life. Because at the end of the day, the only real closure you need is the decision to stop waiting for it. See, one of the most powerful shifts a woman can make is the way she views rejection. Most people take rejection personally. It hits them like a wrecking ball to the ego. They spiral into questions like, what did I do wrong? Was I not good enough? Did I say something that pushed him away? And suddenly they're playing detective in their own mind, trying to solve a mystery that was never meant to be theirs in the first place. But here's the truth. High-value women don't see rejection as failure. They see it as a filter, a natural, necessary filter that helps eliminate what was never right for them in the first place. And that mindset changes everything. When someone walks away, doesn't pursue you, ghosts you, or simply doesn't reciprocate your energy, you're being given information, valuable, honest information. And instead of chasing answers or clinging to hope, a high-value woman says, thank you for revealing that now. Because she understands that every person who leaves her life without committing, without matching her energy, without truly seeing her, that person is doing her a favor. See, the wrong people will always reveal themselves when you hold the right standards. But if you take their rejection as a verdict on your worth, you'll start lowering those standards just to hold on to something that was never right. That's not love. That's fear. That's attachment. An attachment that's based on fear leads us to cling to things that are actually holding us back. A high-value woman doesn't operate from fear. She operates from truth. And the truth is, not everyone is going to choose you. And that's okay. Because if you were chosen by everyone, you'd probably be diluting what makes you special just to be palatable to people who don't matter. She knows that rejection doesn't say she's not enough. It simply says, this isn't your person. Imagine if you could see rejection like a bouncer at the door of your life. Their job isn't to hurt you, it's to keep out what doesn't belong. That person who never called back? Good. The one who sent mixed signals and disappeared? better. The one who strung you along but never followed through, thank you next. That's the filter doing its job. And the sooner you stop trying to sneak those people past the door, the sooner the right person gets a clear path to enter. Let me say something really important. High-value women do feel the sting of rejection. This isn't about being emotionless or pretending it doesn't hurt. Of course it hurts when someone you were excited about pulls away. Of course it stings when you imagined a future and it never materialized. But she doesn't let that sting redefine her. She doesn't let a no become a narrative. Because here's the mistake so many people make. They let a moment of rejection define the story they tell themselves for years. They carry that moment with them like luggage. Every time someone new shows up, they hesitate, they flinch, they assume the worst. And slowly they build a wall around themselves, not to keep others out, but to protect the wounded version of themselves inside. But a high-value woman, she processes the pain and then she lets it go. She knows that rejection is just a piece of information, not a prophecy. She doesn't need every door to open. She only needs the right one to open. And she'd rather keep walking past 100 closed doors than settle for one that only opens halfway. So when someone doesn't choose her, she doesn't shrink. She doesn't chase. She doesn't audition. She says this just means we're not aligned, and she moves forward with grace, with dignity, and most importantly, with her self-worth intact. Because when you truly value yourself, you don't beg to be kept. You don't overextend to be seen. You trust that the right person won't need convincing. The right person won't make you feel like you're chasing them down a hallway. They'll meet you at the door. So let rejection do its job. Let it filter out what isn't worthy of your time, your heart, or your energy. And every time someone walks away, instead of asking, what did I lose? Start asking, what space just opened up for something better? Because that's what high-value women understand. Rejection isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of alignment. Attraction is easy, let's be honest. How many times have we met someone and felt that spark, that chemistry that makes you feel like you've known them forever? The butterflies, the late night texts, the rush of adrenaline when they say your name. All of that can feel so intoxicating. But here's the truth that high-value women deeply understand. Attraction alone is not enough to build a healthy, lasting relationship. It might start the conversation, but it won't sustain the connection. High-value women aren't just looking for the fire, they're looking for alignment. Emotional, intellectual, life goal alignment. They know that a spark without substance burns out quickly. It might keep you warm for a while, but it won't build the kind of fire that lasts through the storms life throws at you. That's why they ask different questions, not just, do I like him? But is he right for the life I want? That subtle shift changes everything. You can feel intensely drawn to someone who is completely wrong for you. Think about that. Just because you feel something doesn't mean it's something worth building on. Attraction without alignment is like building a house on sand. No matter how beautiful it looks on the outside, it won't stand. High-value women know that just because it feels good doesn't mean it is good for them. When a high-value woman meets someone, she doesn't rush to make him the one. She slows down. She observes. She listens, not just to what he says, but to how he lives. Does he respect her time? Is he emotionally available? Does he follow through? Does he want a life that sync with hers, not just on the surface, but at the core? And here's the powerful part. If the answer is no, she doesn't try to force it. She doesn't turn into the emotional architect of the relationship, trying to build something out of broken blueprints. She lets it go, even if there's chemistry, even if he's charming, even if she's already imagined a future with him, because she knows that walking away from someone who's misaligned is not a loss. It's an act of self-respect. Alignment means values match. It means long-term goals are compatible. It means that the pace of life, the emotional depth, the communication style, the willingness to grow, all of it moves in the same direction. That doesn't mean two people have to be identical, but they do have to be moving toward the same horizon. A high-value woman doesn't settle for someone who only shows up when it's convenient. She's not impressed by someone who gives just enough to keep her around. She's interested in someone who is aligned with her in words, in actions, and in intention. That's why she doesn't lose herself in infatuation. She's not ignoring red flags just because the chemistry is intense. She's not staying in situations that feel unstable just because there's potential. She's not auditioning for a role in someone's life who hasn't even proven they deserve her presence, because she knows that love without alignment leads to exhaustion, and she values peace over potential. When someone says, "But we have such a strong connection," she thinks, "That's great, but do we have a shared vision?" When someone says, "But we get along so well," she asks, "Do we show up for each other consistently?" When someone tries to re-enter her life after giving her mixed signals, she doesn't just respond to the chemistry, she remembers the history, and she uses that wisdom to make empowered choices. This mindset doesn't come from being cold or distant. It comes from clarity. High-value women love deeply. They feel, they care, but they don't compromise their standards for the sake of fleeting excitement. They don't give the best parts of themselves to someone who only shows up in flashes. They don't invest where there's no return. They know that alignment protects them from heartbreak disguised as romance. And that emotional security isn't something you beg for. It's something that comes naturally when you're with the right person. The person who's not just attracted to you, but committed to growing with you. The person who not only makes you feel wanted, but makes you feel safe. Safe to be fully yourself. Safe to open up. Safe to build something real. So, if you've been holding on to someone who gives you highs and lows, but never shows consistency, someone who lights you up but also drains you, someone who says all the right things but doesn't live them, ask yourself, are we aligned? And if the answer is no, give yourself the gift of walking away with your dignity intact. Because in love, as in life, it's not about how it starts, it's about how it grows. And a high-value woman doesn't just follow the spark. She follows the signs. She listens to her intuition. She trusts her standards. And she chooses alignment over attraction every single time. That's what keeps her powerful. That's what keeps her peaceful. That's what keeps her magnetic.